That intro makes me smile every time with the DeLorean. I love it. All right. We are back to the VIBE Edu crew. And we have been talking about executive functioning. The first one, we kind of intro to it and talk through a variety of things. And of course, we have an expert on the show in regards to executive functioning. This episode, we're going to talk about core executive functioning. I wish I knew what that meant. So I'm going to throw it to Mitch Weathers as he's going to educate not only myself, but those who are listening.
Okay. Well, you'll have to read my next book because it's all about core EFs. But that's a good place for us to start. There's, I'll back up a little bit because I am like TJ. I have no idea what we said on the last episode. That was too long ago. But when you think of, I think a good starting place with with anything is like get some definition around it. So generally speaking, executive functions are cognitive processes. They're not skills, which is kind of confusing to a lot of people because you typically hear executive functioning skills. But when we think about cognitive processes, in particular with executive functions, there's, as educators and as practitioners, we're looking for the behaviors that manifest from those cognitive processes. So we know where executive functions, like, for example, happen in the brain. Like we can see that and map the brain, and it's all super interesting. But if I have to teach 21st graders tomorrow, like that's great, but what's it actually mean for me practically speaking? So in that sense, we are trying to spot these kind of discrete actions or skills. Like what's it look for a student to demonstrate self-regulated behavior? Like we can spot that, or get and stay organized, or whatever you want to kind of look at the skill. So I think we got to hold kind of both of those at the same time. And there's two kind of dimensions, if you will. There's core executive functions and there's higher order executive functions. And the reason that they're kind of delineated is developmental. It's the biology. It's what is happening with our brains and our bodies as human beings as we get older. And so when we look at core, what we're talking about today, core executive functions ideally are kind of explicitly addressed in the younger years. So TKK 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Whereas the higher order start to develop and emerge in those 3, 4, 5 in grades and up, right? And that grade 3, oftentimes there's no like date we can put on there, is somewhat of an inflection point where and if you think about it this way, in education, there can be this unspoken expectation that you are starting to become a more independent learner. And it shouldn't be unspoken, for one. We should make that very explicit. But that, through an executive functioning lens, is that emergence of these higher order EFs, if you will. Now, with all of that said, when you learn about core and higher order, there's overlap, interplay at any grade level. And I say that because I just last week, as you all know, or I'm not sure when this episode drops, but in late March, my second book came out, and it's executive functions for every K-3 classroom. And it's specifically looking at core executive functions. And after writing it with Sarah Oberly, and of course, reading it and rereading it, I'm like, oh my gosh, every middle school, high school, upper elementary, and dare I say college, and Kim's nodding because she read it. And so did you guys. I just feel like there's benefits there. So to say that core EFs are not relevant for any grade level, I think is not true, but I'll say one more thing and then I'll be quiet. What are core EFs? There's 3 of them: working memory, inhibition, and cognitive flexibility, sometimes referred to as shifting. And we can talk about what each of those 3 are. Well, I'll just say real quick as a definition, and then I'll throw it to you guys. That working memory is this kind of some refer to it as like your brain's spotlight, like whatever you're focused on, whatever you're kind of thinking about. Some refer to it as the mental sketch pad in your brain, right? Where it's active, and that's different. It's synonymous at times with short-term memory, but working memory is an active space Obviously, short-term memory is a more passive, temporary holding place. And then there's long-term memory, which is the ultimate goal of things we're teaching and learning. Working memory, inhibition, cognitive flexibility. Inhibition is just as it sounds. Can I inhibit and stay on task? Can I stay focused? Can I block out maybe what's external stimuli, or it might be internal stimuli? What's interesting there, it has a lot to do with working memory, but what we can do to reduce how much students need to inhibit can really free up working memory capacity, right? So if I have something going on in the classroom that's interfering with my ability to stay focused, that energy, that like cognitive effort, if you will, that I'm using to try to stay focused and stay on task, I'm using a lot of working memory bandwidth, which is finite, right? There's only so much of it, just to inhibit. So we can get really creative with that. And then cognitive flexibility is just as it sounds. Like, can I be flexible when things change? Can I consider someone else's opinion or perspective? And that's hard for many adults, but you take the first grader, like all of that. I mentioned this before. I know I did. We have to really be careful to view students through an asset lens and not a deficit lens when it comes to executive functions, because there's a natural emergence and development. So if you may not be able to be as cognitively flexible as I assume or expect you to be, well, that's okay. That's actually what's developmentally happening. So those are the core three, and that's the focus of book 2. What do you guys think?
I just want to talk about cognitive flexibility just for a hot second, because just last night I was with a group, and one of the things we were talking about was name it to tame it. That kind of phrase. We're like, okay, if you've got some rigid thinkers, if you have some kids that where being a flexible thinker is tricky for them, let's name it. What does that look like? What does that look like in your brain when that happens? Let's draw that out, and then let's tame it. Let's also flip it over and go, well, how can you defeat that? What can you do? What can you control? And this teacher had done this exercise with her classroom where she had asked them, okay, think about a time when you had some major stuck thinking, I would say rock brain moments or stuck thinking, and they drew out these moments. And it was like pictures, you guys, of I don't want to eat that for dinner. Ew, macaroni again. And it was like thought bubbles with like stuff like that. Or I don't want to sit next to that person. That's not my friend. And it was just scenarios that these kids had drawn out. And on the flip side, on the other side of the paper, they had drawn out like, okay, I can have whatever it is for dinner, right? Like, it's okay. I could be flexible. And then the other one was like, I forgot. It was just like the cutest thing, but it's more than cute. It's actually, you're teaching into that. You're teaching into that skill. And I said, okay, but that's not the end. Like, you just did this, teacher, with your student this one time, or this class this one time. Now you're going to front load with that. So I know that this is going to be tricky for you guys. I know that last time or yesterday, I saw a lot of stuck thinking. So remember, name it to tame it, or remember, you got to be flexible. What are you going to say to yourself? What are you going to do? And front loading with that, just we were talking about last night, it exercises that muscle, right? Over and over and over again, because it's a muscle that you have to exercise. That cognitive flexibility just doesn't like come to you. And we do, as adults in the room, tend to expect that kids just can be flexible, or you've gotten to 3rd grade, you must just be flexible now. No, we got to teach into it. So I love that you were talking about that. And I think a lot of the listeners are going to go like, well, how do I do that? How do I teach into that? Right. And so I think that's one way.
It's of the 3 core, one thing I say is of the 3 core, cognitive flexibility is the higher order of the 3 in some ways, but they're all so interrelated, right? That the ultimate goal would be that I don't even have to front load it anymore and teach through it, so that if the routine. We have this routine, and we've talked about this on the show, Kim, or whatever it is. Like, you touch this thing when we go here, whatever. It's just this predictable thing we do, and that's just the rhythm of the day. This is how we do these routines. Well, sometimes those routines get interrupted, and instead of it just being complete chaos because I can't do the thing I'm supposed to do or we normally do, that ideally it'd be like, oh, you can just be flexible, like just be chill, be flexible. And it's like, well, if you're not leaning into it and teaching into it, and I would say what you're doing is modeling, like, hey, if that was to happen and that kid threw up on the floor right in front of you, we can't walk that way anymore. That nobody can walk that way. What do we now? What? Well, if there's some like options I can envision, things we've talked about, like you're saying, teaching into. But the interesting thing about it, if you back through the others, that inhibition, well, if I'm having to inhibit less, then all of it means I'm ultimately reducing cognitive load, which is freeing up working memory capacity, which makes the other two far more possible. But if a student is dysregulated and not really feeling in their body for whatever reason, all these other things really start to break down. Like, none of us, I know it's not a young person thing. We're not seeing someone else's perspective when I'm just not very regulated is less likely, right? So, especially littles. What do you got, TJ? I can tell you're about to say something.
I know.
He's been itching.
Uh-huh.
I like the conversation. I think it's really good for teachers to have that language, Mitch, the core, and to understand these things that are happening in the development of young people, to not excuse it, to not expect it, and to teach into it. And so I was just thinking, like, about also kids who come, like the way Kim was talking, like she would talk to a kid, or like you said, when that happens, when the kid threw up in front of you, why'd you keep going that way? Or talking to kids like that, you might need to be flexible there, and I think I was thinking about kids who come from like poverty, for example, who have fewer adults talking to them like that in many cases, not all cases, but in many cases, talking to them at the age of 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, before they come to school, and kind of helping to build some of those skills that lots of kids come to school and don't have them, just like reading, writing, every other skill that kids, and I know you didn't call them skills earlier, but they're things that we need to lean into to make sure all kids have, to level the playing field. And I'm glad to hear that there's a K-3 book, and that age range is kind of an inflection point for these really important skills. And then I can't help, like, Kim always has those set phrases to name it. I was like, I'm going to put that on a t-shirt. Name it. I want to say, name it, tame it, reclaim it, reframe it. Explain it.
It'll be in the Kim Gameroz shop here soon.
I better not make a t-shirt or she'll trademark it.
Yeah, her lawyer's already on it, TJ.
The name of
No,
the game.
TJ, I wanted to say, though, like, I agree with you. And I think there's a lot of skills that are lacking. I think a lot of our teachers are seeing it. And not to go off of like a tangent that's not a part of executive functioning, but if you look at even just like a self-assessment of emotions, or regulation skills, or social skills. I mean, there's a lot of things I think that are lacking with our students. And I think a lot of educators, I think we've all heard it, is our students are different. Okay, well, if they're different, let's do something different in the classroom. And I think these are great core skills, because Kim does a beautiful job of talking about this as far as like the multi-directions to the students and taking the cognitive load off. And unfortunately, when these skills are undeveloped, it then looks like defiance. And if it's defiance, then it's perceived as a behavior issue. And I would just say that we might need to rewind and say, okay, as the adult, as the teacher, what have we done as far as the executive dysfunction? And what are we doing to correct it so that way it's not something that they have to think about? It is automatic. It's something that, like to Mitch's point, doesn't require working memory. It just is a routine that's already established day after day after day. And it's a skill that is now possessed by that child.
That's kind of the goal with executive functions, is to reduce interference and increase automaticity. As I mentioned, if you have less to inhibit, right, less interference, temptations, distractions, whatever it might be, and I have routines, the three kind of aspects that we encourage teachers in this K3 book is environment, instruction, and routines, through that lens of decreasing interference, increasing automaticity. And so it's nothing, the nice thing about it really is it's nothing else or something else for a teacher to do. It's like I've been saying in talks I've been giving, or PDs, it's like putting on a pair of executive functioning glasses. You just, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And you're looking through those glasses at your environment, your instructions, and your routines, recognizing that there's some things that you can't influence, right? That's in particular, a lot of those internal distractions or interferences may or may not be within your realm of influence, but the things that are, that intentionality to reduce interference, increase automaticity is it's actually quite fun. There they are. That's what they actually look like too.
EF glasses.
Except they're supposed to be blue.
Oh, hold on. I think I have blue. Hold on. Let me look.
Kim was going to say something. Let's see if it matches.
Sorry.
Oh,
Although this
front
one's
of the
got a
camera.
tag. I got to cut this tag off. Hold
Yeah.
on,
Put them
Mitch.
on real quick to see if they match.
I'm going to look even more ridiculous
taking
with the
too
tag.
long.
Well, that's
All right, you're
what they're
taking
going to
too
get.
long. Go ahead, Kim. What were you going to say?
See, these are better.
Hey, they do match. They do match.
I told
You should get those up on your website and trademark them like Kim Gameroz. And
these are
How about I
actually
just link
gifts.
over to Kim's site? They can get
These
anything
are gifts
they want.
from Katie Kinder.
that's cool. I actually like the idea of the EF glasses,
I do too.
I do
and maybe
too.
even some kind of Kim can think of this, whip this up, something that kids can do to like
Magnifying glasses.
I already do. We say future thinking glasses. Put on your future
Oh,
thinking.
that's so good. That's got to be something that teachers take away, because I know you're going to say something here in a minute, Kim, but I want like Mitch to get into the practices as well. Like, I don't want to leave the audience hanging on, because I'm just thinking as a teacher, okay, I have my EF glasses on and I now have name it, tame it, but I need some other strategies to use with my kids
Sure.
to make sure that we're building these three core executive functions.
Go ahead, Kim. You were going to say something. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just thinking again, because during the week, you guys, I meet with groups of teachers. And so when we're talking about behaviors, like Josh, when you were talking, like, is it really a behavior? I always go, oh, what is it really? And what system routine and what can we dig into the skill that we can really hone in on? And so one of them just the other day was, I have an eloper. This kid doesn't want to stay in class. I have an eloper. This kid
Is his name TJ? That was TJ was an eloper. Sorry, Kim. Go ahead.
This kid is also a selective mute. Okay. This kid also comes from another country, so is an EL kid. This kid, I don't know, there's like a whole bunch of different things to kind of describe the kid. So I'm kind of listening, and I'm going, what system can we put in place so that this kid even can identify how they're feeling first, and second, what tools they have to support them in the moment so that they don't elope. And paint me a picture. This kid is going into a counselor's room and also a gen ed classroom. And I'm thinking, can we have the same routine? And so what we ended up doing was
Same everything. Same
Yeah.
language, same,
Yeah,
yeah.
same everything. And so this counselor who we were working with, she's like, he also loves dinosaurs. I was like, perfect. So now it's going to be dinosaur faces with all these different emotions. You're also going to hang a mirror on the wall with like from the command hook. I want a mirror, like a mirror on the wall, sort of a thing, like a Disney princess mirror, that kind of a thing. I want it hanging on the wall so that way this kid can come in, see their face. Really, number one, identify how they're feeling. Look at the emoji dinosaurs or whatever. If it's digital version, fine. Identify how they're feeling to matchy. And then also figure out what tool they can use to support themselves. And guess what ended up happening? After just 2 days of this system, both with the counselor and in the gen ed classroom, the kid did not elope. The kid stayed in the classroom. And so when you're talking about, again, is it eloping? Is it preventing the eloping? It's teaching into the lagging skills of these kids. That's what it is. I also was thinking about when you're talking about the interference, open house has been happening all across like school campuses all across the country. And when I see pictures of open house and I see all of the stuff everywhere, and I don't want to use the word clutter, but I'm going to say the word clutter, right? Like, and all of the things, all of the places, I think to be that kid, to be this kid, the eloper who likes the dinosaurs, to be in a classroom filled with all of these things everywhere. Think about how tricky it is for that brain to do any new learning, right? In an environment like that. So, Mitch, I want you to talk about anything you want to talk about in regards to all those.
I can talk about anything I want to talk about.
Yes. But use those as examples. Use those as kind of like jumping off points.
Yeah. And you're, if you had to, not to apply any labels, but, for a student, a neurodiverse kiddo like this one, some might hear that and be like, well, that's an extreme case. What about everybody else in the classroom? But keeping this student like front and center, well, let me back up a little bit.
Hold on, Mitch. Let's like slash that, because like the assumption is that is a abnormal student, but I think it's 1 in 5 students are neurodivergent, and a lot of them are not even
identified,
found. Like especially in elementary, that's not even something that they really are testing or determining. So that's just a normal statistic. So if we have that in our mind as educators, then it's not abnormal. It's just the norm.
Right. Well, that was just what I was going to say is,
we're on the same wavelength, of course.
Yeah. As usual. Keeping this one kid in mind, but recognizing that EF work needs to be tier 1, all kids.
Yep.
Right. And a universal MTSS tier 1, in my opinion, should do many things, but one thing it should do is help identify areas of concern or need. And at times in the tier 1 space, right, in that gen ed core class, address or help mitigate that concern that a student might be having or facing, right? And the reason I say that is if something's persistent and isn't mitigated in the tier 1, then you have a more authentic tier 2 and tier 3, what Kim just described, right, for everybody listening, the conversation between counselor, teacher, Kim, that's more of a tier 2 intervention, or maybe even tier 3, to be honest, right? A more targeted, specific intervention for the student. But in the absence of a tier 1, if we're not addressing all kids, of course, you're going to have, like TJ says, too many tier 2 or tier 3. Like you can't tier 2 yourself out of that tier 1 problem. So this work belongs, that frame that Kim just talked about. The reason I said that, Josh, was I think some people might hear that and go, well, that's a lot of work. Got to have the mirror. No, sure. Tier 2, tier 3. But when we look at globally for all the kids in the room, and we consider 3 areas: environment, my instructions, and my routines. And routines are really interesting, Kim, because then you can get collective if we adopt the same routines, whether that be from class to class or counselors or whatnot. But the environment, I'll focus on that real quick, because you just touched on that with open house, anything different, anything new, lots of stuff in the room, which is kind of what it sounds like. And then the expectation that we're just going to keep everything going as normal and we're going to learn new things, and not recognizing that, oh, even just the physical environment in here is totally different and full of lots of stimuli, which tends to happen anyway, and not always, but primary classes can tend to be a little over decorated, dare I say, at times. And not to say that that's wrong, but the EF classes would consider kind of 3 dimensions of the environment: the visual field, the acoustic environment, and then the physical stuff, the space itself. And if I was encouraging anybody, without getting like specific, which I can if we want, but just saying, okay, is there anything in my acoustic environment that is forcing students to have to inhibit, to stay on task, to stay focused, to stay engaged with their partner, whatever the thing might be happening, that I'm in control of, right? So the idea that a noisy classroom is a productive classroom, what I always say is, well, it might be, and it might not be. And we tell stories in the book of students for whom it was not, and we just didn't know. And so that circles us all the way back around, like this kiddo that Kim's talking about. All executive functioning work boils down to relationships and knowing who's in the room. And that in and of itself is a huge task and a tall order, even if you have 20 kids. But like me in 9th grade, it's common to have 150 to 170 students, and I'm trying to get to know them. So having routines and ways to do that is important. So I know if I might need to have some adjustments to my acoustic environment for this student, or the visual environment, the visual field. We talk about one, the most current research is 20-30% blank space in every classroom, right? So that I might choose when I'm giving directions or direct instruction or something where I'm reducing the visual field behind me. I think we may have talked about this last time, like scanning is really taxing on working memory capacity, that bandwidth. And so if I'm trying to figure out the letters because I don't quite know my alphabet yet, or I'm reversing my P's and my B's and D's, and right, like there's some things we can be that might be commonplace, like, oh, I have my number line, I have my alphabet, I have capital letters and lowercase, all above the chalkboard or the whiteboard. Well, if I don't know all of that yet, that could be very visually distracting for me as a learner. So just interesting things to consider. And then also I'd love your thoughts on this, Kim, not just the things that I can adjust, but then also empowering students to regulate themselves. So we have this great picture in the book of a student, and they're kind of like, I don't know what they look like. It looks like a little cubicle, but it's a little like trifold thing. It's probably about 1.5 feet tall. And any time when students are working independently or trying to focus, maybe they're reading, they're doing something, they know that if they're having a hard time staying on track, they can go get that and set it up on their desk and focus, which is pretty novel for like a high school. I don't know if I've ever seen that in a high school setting. I know TJ, he was given that.
Yeah, I was going to say, didn't TJ get a refrigerator box?
He got a box. Yeah, but that wasn't TJ going and grabbing the box. It was different.
No, that was mandated.
But the picture's so funny because this student clearly knew, like, I need my blocker up. And there's this picture taken, and the student right behind the kid is literally, and it was just a camp, like it's a quick shot in a classroom, but the kid's like shouting, you could tell, like yelling across the classroom, and there's this other kid in the little cubby trying to like focus and read. And so there's just, the book's full of those kinds of things, like, hey, think about what this might be. Think about, do you have to play music in your classroom? Maybe not. Like, just considering that. And it's just, again, those glasses, putting on and thinking about it in terms of like instruction. Is there too much content? Do they have the background knowledge to do the thing I'm hoping? Am I making assumptions about, 3 + 7, right? And if I'm assuming you already know that so that you can just do that without having to make that computation, then what we're trying to do is more likely to come about. But I think, and then I'll actually shut up, Kim, so you can, I said I wanted to get your thoughts on this. What I've seen, and this is true of any grade level, is when we make that assumption about, let's just say, for example, that background knowledge. And what I mean by background knowledge is I'm not using any working memory to figure it out, to use it. It's just there, right? And if it may not be there for all learners in the room, and things kind of start to break down, which is what you said earlier, Josh, starts to manifest as behaviors, which can be interpreted as defiance. And you're like, oh, but you didn't know 7 + 3. That's where the whole thing kind of came off the rails. So it's all those kind of, I think, really interesting and fun considerations, and maybe hopefully possibly a new way of looking at them.
So real quick, Kim, I'm just thinking like above every student's head is a little battery. And like, if you have these glasses on, then you can see like, is your environment or your unpredictable routines or fill in the blank, unclear transition, is that draining the working memory of your kids? Because if it is, then that really contributes. I know, right? Everything I just said is a negative. But if we have those glasses on, like Mitch is saying, then it makes sense as to, okay, why they're having a tough time regulating, or they're having a tough time focusing or getting that task done.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's that proactive example that Kim gave of, okay, then what, right? And the really interesting epiphany I think a lot of teachers will have is at times what you can like create something that for this learner, tier 2, tier 3, like this is this routine for this kid based on what we know about them. But I think what will happen is teachers read this, which is why I think teachers at all levels should read it, is slight adjustments to things they're already doing that makes it more of a universal tier 1 and starts to have an influence in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. You said something about the interference around them and when you're teaching in direct instruction. And in my heart, I literally went like, that's why I always bring kids down to the carpet. Mm-hmm. That's why I always, when I go into classrooms, I say, do you bring them down to the carpet? And they usually say, nope. And I was like, I'm moving this table and this table. I'm going to explain to them that these are the boundaries. And depending on how old they are, I'll say like, this is hot lava. You stay in this area only, right? Watch me walk around the hot lava perimeter. Okay, here we go. And I'll get the kids to come down to the carpet, because then they are not distracted. When they are back there away from you and you're like preaching, giving direct instruction, they are looking out the window. They are looking underneath their desk. They are like all over the place. And you see it as behavior. You see it as defiance. But if you take away the distractions and you bring them close to you, now all of a sudden, guess what? There's less of that, because I think like that was a huge thing when you were talking about that. I was like, well, yeah, those are my EF glasses that I can't take off ever. When I go into a classroom, that's just they're on permanently. Mm-hmm. The other thing was, this is why I know I'm such a crazy person when it comes to anchor charts and what an anchor chart should look like. It's because I am always teaching with the lens of it's going to be tricky for a kid to like grasp on or be able to get the information that you want them to get in order to be independent. So a teacher, usually if they have some sort of anchor chart and they're teaching and maybe they're building different math strategies on this anchor chart or whatever, and then they're doing all these other things, and then kids are coming up and there's writing, right? And now all of a sudden it's just like a bunch of mess on this anchor chart. And then you want these kids to independently be doing something on this math, whatever it is, right? And the kids now are wandering around, getting a drink of water, talking to a friend. They don't know that they can use that tool, getting that little, I would call it the office. Go get your office, right? Put it around you. They can't do all of that stuff because this is supposed to be teaching them and supporting them. And you have a big old mess of it instead. And so I'm not saying that the answer is like, as an educator, you need to work on your printing. That's not it. And it isn't that you need to go and be an artist. That's not it either. But conversations around very, very clearly stating this strategy.
Clarity. Yeah.
Yes. This strategy over here is when you're thinking this way, and I'm going to make it red. Okay, so if you are thinking like the red mathematician brain, then you're going to use that red strategy. And they're like, ah, okay, now see the green over here, this chunk over here, this green is a different math strategy. It's when you blah, 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 and they're sharing however you do it. But then they're like, oh, I'm the green guy. I solve math problems like the green. Or today I want you to solve using the blue and the pink, like whatever it looks like that. There's so many different little tweaks that you can do to make things clear. Yeah. To make things clear for them, to support them.
And rooting that all, I think this is really important, is grounding that in the understanding that really what you're talking about is reducing cognitive load, ambiguity, interference, anything where I'm like, I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to, and all of that is the science of it, the neuroscience of it is you're reducing that cognitive load to free up working memory. And that, you know, nothing's perfect. We're always trying to get it better, but that's really what's happening when you take all the math strategies off of the chart and make them discrete. You know, we reduce ambiguity, increase clarity, and that's reducing interference and increasing automaticity. Like I don't have to use any of my capacity. And when we do, this is the crossroads of executive functions and classroom management.
Yep.
Right. And Josh talks about this ad nauseum, like the behavior is manifesting from the symptom. There's something going on, and this is what's being exhibited. We just got to figure that out, which is where it all comes down to relationships again, which everything we do does. This messy to messy, or messy human to human endeavor. But so often, it's this dysregulation because I'm living in a low level or heightened level of, you know, fight or flight, and I don't, you know, when cortisol's up, executive functioning is down. And that may not be like, you know, like chaos, but it might be just that interference I'm experiencing in the classroom. And then we want a kid to be cognitively flexible. Like, right. You know, adults can't do that. And it's worth saying, even though we're talking about littles, because it's where core EFs are emerging, that these are not academic in nature. They're not school. This is humanness. Right? And we all will benefit from thinking about working memory, cognitive flexibility, inhibition. It's the feedback has been parents with this already. In particular with the pre-reads, people were like, every parent with little kids needs to read this.
Yep.
Yeah. I know I wish I had read it when I was parenting littles.
Well, if you have those glasses on, then you can see all of the kids' little nervous systems.
Yeah.
If you view them like that, it changes the perspective of what you're doing in the classroom. Or if you're a parent, how you're working with your own child. TJ, I'm curious. I want TJ to go on a rant real quick.
But I want to say one thing before you rant. What I love about this conversation, we haven't talked about standards or curriculum or testing, and we could talk about all of that through an EF lens. But this is the stuff. This is the foundation. This is the stuff of learning and maximizing the potential for what each individual brings to that particular space at that particular time. That's the art and craft of teaching. You've heard TJ say this on the show, like there is a science, right, to teaching, and there's also a craft, an art to it. And I think when you consider these EF glasses, we keep saying it's kind of both, right? And this isn't about perfection, whoever's listening. This is always a moving target because it's a messy human to human endeavor, which is always changing every day. All right, rant, TJ.
No, I got a question for TJ.
Okay.
TJ, with these core
6
EFs. No, I'm going to say 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
So with these core EF skills, do you find that these are a predictor for college and career readiness?
Oh, 100%. And we've all talked about that. I think that the future of any of these skills that are stackable over the years that kids get through school and through other means are super important. I actually like the fact that Mitch brought up parents because these are environmental. Kids are getting prepared for college and career in school, out of school, field trips, work experience, career exposure, social and emotional learning, like all of that is what makes for a student who's prepared to go into the workforce and to get into college and do well. And that's important. It's a good question. The other thing that I was going to come back to is the noise, the environmental noise. Like because you said that a noisy classroom is a productive classroom is typically sometimes something what people think, but you're questioning that. And so am I. But I actually think the intentional part isn't noisy or not noisy or whisper or not whisper. I think that the measurement of the intentionality around this is a noisy time. Mm-hmm. This is a silent time. This is an individual time. This is a I talk and you listen and take notes time. This is a one kid's going to talk to another kid who's going to talk back, 2 people talking. This is a groups of 4 kids are working together on something versus just a lesson plan or just it's always noisy in here. And I think I love stations and I love the use of stations, but I also think we ought to be really careful with that based on what you've said with our EF classes, because if it's noisy at this station, what kids are needing to do at this station might not be able to occur. Mm-hmm. And so maybe it's simple fixes like the kids who are using the tech can have headphones on and that drowns out the noise instead of just having the iPad there, right? And so I think there's some intentionality around how we build that space. I don't think it takes a ton of extra work. It's just thoughtfulness. And the one thing that I have seen with project-based learning, and I'm all for it, and hands-on stuff, and I do believe in the lecture and direct instruction still. Like I think there's a place for that. Don't get me wrong, but what I've seen happen in a lot of classrooms is that we lack silence. Like silence is a real part of thinking and being solo with our thoughts
and reading
and reading. Like, I think we need to revisit the times in which it should be silent, the times in which I'm talking and students aren't, the times in which, because that's the other thing I've seen, the teachers talking and kids are chit-chatting. Mm-hmm. It's like, I don't know. I do think sometimes it should be noisy, but not all the time. That's for certain.
What you're talking about, and we keep saying those are all routines. Like Kim said, we come down to the carpet when I'm going to give either direct instruction or directions, because I'm going to lower my voice because you're all really close and the lava's over there. And I'm going to throw your ass on that lava if you talk right now. So you're going to listen to me. Right. Those are all like routines that we put in place. And it's the whole thing with the glasses is looking at noise, for example, as like the acoustic environment. Because you brought that up. Is another tool in a teacher's pedagogical toolkit. Like, how am I using this and why? That's the intentionality, like the physical environment. It's just another tool. And too often when we think of space, when we think of the environment, we inherit these spaces. You're now in classroom, you're in classroom 3. You maybe taught there for 20 years, whatever that was. And you kind of inherited this space and you inherited this furniture. And I think no one is deliberately thinking this, but we make the mistake at times of thinking that those spaces are neutral, and they're never neutral. Learning environments are never neutral. And so it's saying something. Of a colleague who says, what's your classroom telling your students before you ever open your mouth? Because it's saying something, because they're not natural environments. They're artificial by design. That's what we do. We designed them. And so to get in there and think about all of those, these are just other tools in my toolkit, as opposed to, okay, this is kind of my space. I'm going to decorate it. I want it to feel warm and cozy, which we do, but we can't stop there. It's thinking about those aspects through that cognitive load and executive functioning lens. But we can pick this conversation up next time.
Yeah.
What's up, Josh?
Well, if
I'll go
everyone
on
loves,
and on and on.
I
And
know.
everyone's probably like listening, like, I'm EF bored.
Well, I know folks enjoy the Lava teacher script that you just
effing
provided,
bored.
and so they can go grab your book for that. That's
Yeah.
perfect.
It's out. It's actually in the real world. Look, I have one.
I know. Kim and I were talking about ordering your book and not being able to get it because
you
it's
guys went to
delayed for some
Amazon,
reason.
not through
I know.
Organized
So I'm
Binder.
gonna put the Corwin link in the show notes for
Put the
everyone, so
organized
that way-
binder one in. Organized
Or that
binder
one
link.
too.
Because then I
Actually,
can
that's better.
sign a copy, which is way more fun.
I forgot about that. So thank you for reminding me.
And what
Next,
about
we'll
these?
put the organized.
puppies?
I know. I got mine on display.
He's got
Got-
two.
Oh, you guys!
I've got this
Maybe I
fancy
had one.
paper. I got this
You
fancy
know.
paper.
I got the fancy paper too. That I thought
I didn't get the
paper
fancy
was
paper.
best
I don't know
part.
how I didn't make it.
Yes, you did.
I did.
Kim was gonna reach through the camera and strangle you.
But
All
look,
right.
I'm ready. I'm shipping. These are signed copies. I'll even sign
Boom.
the envelope for you. This
Look
one's
at
going
you.
to Jamie somewhere
You're fancy.
You are
in
fancy.
St. Louis, Missouri.
He's just trying to get to the Kim level. That's
He
what we're
is.
all trying to aspire to. So
not even
Kim.
close.
I know.
Is there
None of
tissue
us.
paper in that box? You have tissue paper in that box?
Yes.
Does
These
it have the
actually do
organized
because I
binder
ran out of
logo?
the packing paper. And my wife
Does it
was
have
like,
the
"Oh,
organized
no,
binder logo on the ship on the
no,
paper?
but
No,
it has an organized
It's a
binder
Chipotle
sticker in it
napkin,
that you get to
TJ.
keep.
It's just something he threw in there.
Kim, say what you guys say. We gotta go.
I don't have anything. No updates.
You don't have any updates?
Let's wrap this
All
up.
right. We'll wrap it up. Well, I
No.
want everyone to go to the VIBE Edu
Oh, I thought you had some updates.
link. She typically does, but what about Kim? I saw on social media you
Oh,
have a book signing event.
okay. Yes, we can say that. I have a book signing event out here in McKinney, Texas at The Rook, 4 to 6 p.m. on April 9th. If you are an educator, if you're an administrator, if you're a parent, especially a parent of a neurodivergent kiddo, I would love for you to be there. We'll have copies of the book. I'll be signing it. You can purchase them, and we'll have beer, wine, appetizers. Everything is on me. I just want to pour into you. So come if you can. If you're here,
Where are they going to get this information?
I'll leave the link. I'll give it in the show notes. If they
Perfect.
want to come, they can RSVP, and we'll put the link in the show notes for them.
Well done. All right. Well, we're going to close this down. I'm just going to note real quick that our next episode is on high order executive functioning skills, which Mitch referred to at the beginning of this episode, but we're going to do a deep dive for episode 3 of this series. So we're going to close this down and let Mitch go sip some wine. And I hope everyone has an awesome rest of their weekend, and we'll see you next week.